26. The play's the thing. "He will come down," said Innocent. "He could be dead," said Leela. "Or injured," said Dorothy. "We should have stayed. He will come." The doctor's cousins and companions had waited an age in the hall in embarrassed silence for him to arrive. The tall banqueting tables had been positioned round the house's loom, with the glass casket containing the sleeping quinces suitably garlanded to form the centrepiece. 45 places were set around the table, but everyone present had clustered into 2 groups at one end. No one's feet touched the floor. Friends versus family. At last they heard his footsteps. He walked with difficulty across the expanse of the hall, staggering slightly. Well, well, Gallifrey's most dysfunctional family. God, he's drunk, thought Dorothy. She climbed down from her seat to give him a place between herself and Leela. He was not wearing his formal attire, and his clothes were dishevelled and dusty. "Charming," he said, caustically surveying the table. "Cheer up, everyone. It's a party. Others tide felicitations to you all." He flourished a trick bunch of feathery flowers out of his sleeve. "Très festif," said Dorothy. "What happened to you?" "I was given a good talking to," he said. His voice tremored slightly. He had a black eye. "I've never been beaten up by a library before. I don't recommend it. Why doesn't Satralope keep the house under tighter control?" He peered at Chris, who was asleep in the chair beyond Leela. "We can't wake him," she said. "He's sleeping so deeply." Dorothy followed the doctor's accusatory glance up to the roof, where a familiar shape hung in a net of cobwebs. "Jesus, how did that get up there?" "How do we get it down here?" he snapped. "Is this how you treat all your friends?" Innocent called from along the table. "No different from his family," said Rind. Leela whispered, "Say the word, Doctor, and I will make these miserable cousins of yours do you honour." He shook his head. "Don't worry about them. They haven't enjoyed themselves so much for centuries." He turned to the company. "Now, let me guess what's on today's menu." "Fish," said Cousin Rind. "And my shopping," said Dorothy. She nodded across the table at a tray stacked with slices of sun-dried ciabatta bread. "And feather gills," said Alice, eagerly proffering a dish. The doctor frowned suspiciously at him. "Is that my pullover?" A row of woolen question marks peered from under his tunic. "Lose and weep, find and keep," he chanted. "Doctor, how much of it is true?" interrupted Innocent. "Is what true?" "That you will deny me my place as next housekeeper should we all survive." "He's Quincy's successor," interrupted Rind. "He means to throw us all out of our house." "What about me?" said Alice. "He says I have no right to exist at all." "When are we going home?" said Jabisca. While they bickered, the doctor slowly removed his hat and played with the brim. "Let's see what Quincy's has to say about it." There was sudden silence. He glanced at Glospin, who was sitting apart from the others. "I didn't say a word," said his cousin. Quick as a flash, before his chair could object, the doctor climbed onto the banqueting table and threaded his way between the candles and cut glass towards the coffin. There was an uproar from the cousins, shouts of "No!" and "Don't touch him!" "Why?" he said. "What can you possibly be afraid of?" He bowed his head and laid his bunch of flowers on the glass coffin lid. "Requiescat in pace," he said quietly. "How dare you!" Satralope's voice rang out through the hall. "All joints on the table will be carved," observed the doctor, watching various condiment boats scuttle for cover. Satralope's cane clacked on the flagstones as she made her painful way to the table. The drudges came behind her. Down, sir, by all the fires in the kitchen, down. The doctor half smiled. Dorothy had a sudden unpleasant premonition that he was going to play the spoons. She glanced at Leela, who was fingering her knife. The doctor walked across the table to meet the housekeeper. When he reached her place setting, he knelt among the cutlery and bowed his head. "Cousin Satralope, thank you for your hospitality. I am honoured." "Honour?" Her rage was scarcely under control. She lifted her eyes to the gallery. "There were some honourable people here once." Like an imperious sovereign, she lifted her ringed hand towards him. The doctor shrugged. "Lives have hung on a signed contract here, a kissed ring there. Family favours meant precious little to me for many years." As he reached forward to kiss her ring, the old woman grabbed hold of his ear and pulled him off the table. He yelped with pain. Leela and Dorothy both scrambled to help him, but a drudge blocked their way. "What have you done with Quence's will?" demanded Satralope. His face was screwed up in agony. "What have you done with the rest of my cousins?" "Wormholed little revenant, sneaking back here." She twisted his ear hard. "I don't apologize for what the house threatens. It is very angry." She pushed him roughly away. "Of course it's angry," he said from the floor. "What do you expect when you buried it alive with all its family?" "I buried it?" Satralope turned to scan the remnants of her cousins. "The House of Lungbarrow was so ashamed of what you did that it buried itself and took us all with it." The doctor gave a little moan of shock. He stumbled to his feet and stared up at the TARDIS, his hands slapping at his pockets. "The will," he muttered. "I've got the will." Innocent moved in beside him. "Not now! You'll kill us all if you're not careful." She gently guided him back to his seat between Dorothy and Leela. Satralope had climbed into her own place at the head of the table. "At Other's Tide, the time of renewal, we pledge our devotion to the house." "And my name day," muttered the doctor. He signalled for his companions to stand. They let Chris sleep on while Satralope sang the incantations. "Book of Foundations, Chapter Pridum, verse 673. "Lungbarrow," responded the cousins. "We will always return to the loom from which you wove us. Ancient house, sheltering generation upon generation of your kith since the birth of the new time. Home. We are part of your plans, designs, and architecture. We who rejoice in your name of Lungbarrow," they chorused. "Lungbarrow, Lungbarrow." Their cries echoed through the hall, taken up and repeated by the walls and galleries. They stared up and about in fear as the echoes grew more and more boomingly monstrous. "Lungbarrow, Lungbarrow, Lungbarrow." Through the continuing tirade came Satralope's voice. "None of you shall ever leave the house again. The family is united at last." Glospin was staring fixedly across the table at the doctor. The doctor was gazing up at the TARDIS, which was swaying unnervingly in the web. A clash of drums and tuned gongs from invisible musicians. 45 chairs, most of them empty, shuffled round to afford their occupants a view of the open hall. Giant puppets, bigger than the drudges, lurched out of the shadows, huge painted heads on flowing cloaks. They seemed to work themselves. The doctor slumped in his chair. "I hoped we'd be spared this." "Begin the mystery," said Satralope, and stamped her cane. "This ritual," said Leela excitedly, "is it the mystery of the new time?" The doctor gave a glum nod. "Then I have read about it, but it is never performed now. It was presumed lost." "Just like Le Sacre du Printemps," teased Dorothy. The doctor harumphed and looked enviously at Chris. The young man's head slipped back, and he snored gently. The gongs began a rolling, repeated tune like a gamelan band over which a wild flute wailed like the wind. A puppet with a blue cloak and long silver hair full of jewels appeared. One eye was red. It gyrated about the hall, billowing its cloak as if it was casting spells. "This is the all-seeing Pythia," said Leela, "and this is Rassilon." A second, smaller puppet had appeared. It had red hair and a crown and waved a silver mace or rod. It performed a stylized fight with the Pythia puppet. Eventually, the Pythia swung its head high, and the flute shrieked in agony. The floor of the hall actually opened in spectacular fashion, and the puppet vanished in a spurt of flame. "Sepulchasm!" shouted the cousins. "Inaccurate," complained the doctor. "Rassilon should not be wearing that sash yet." "Whoa! Better write in and complain," said Dorothy. Leela shushed them. She seemed quite involved in the spectacle. "It was the curse. Now Gallifrey is doomed, and there are no more children." Dorothy saw the doctor shoot Leela a sudden, piercing glance. "It's just a play," he said. Leela held the look for a long time. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked terrified. Mock snow started to fall from the galleries. Through the swirling white they watched a dozen puppets perform the mystical dance of intuitive revelation, first lamenting in identical movements, then each developing a separate dance of its own. Two figures joined Rassilon. The first juggled flaming balls with a single hand. "Très symbolique," said Dorothy. The second only moved in the background. It was faceless and wrapped in a black cowl. "That is the other," called out Glospin. The doctor went very quiet. Accompanied by another shriek from the flute, the juggling Omega puppet exploded in flames. When the smoke died, only his unscathed hand stuck out of his ashes on a stick. Rassilon moved to take the hand, but the other puppet moved in and snatched up the prize. The two puppets fought a duel, hand to mace, until the other was finally vanquished and cast down. There was a triumphant crescendo of drums and gongs. And Chris suddenly jumped out of his chair. "No," he shouted, "that's all wrong. It wasn't like that at all." "Silence!" ordered Satralope. The house rumbled angrily. The doctor held on to Chris, trying to calm him. "Those aren't his thoughts," said Glospin, pointing at Chris. "They're Wormhole's thoughts. He's the serpent who destroyed our family." The grim puppet of the other rose, towering up from the floor. It gave a fluted shriek and rushed at the doctor, swallowing him whole in its black cowl.